Welcome, my friends, to the Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. And joining me for this show is my blog partner, Al Williams. Tonight, our very special guest is Robert Morningstar. Robert is a civilian intelligence analyst and psychotherapist in New York City. He received a degree in psychology from Fordham University. He's an expert in Chinese language, history, and martial arts. He's an FAA licensed pilot and instrument ground instructor with 23 years of flying experience. Robert has studied the paranormal and UFOs for over 40 years and has published many research articles on the internet, exposing the government cover-up and deception in the JFK assassination, and his work is cited in major books on the assassination, notably in Paris Flammans, The Assassination of America, and Conspiracy Science by Professor James Fetzer. He has also written extensively to expose NASA's use of disinformation technology in suppressing evidence of extraterrestrial life and exposing the real nature and threat of the UFO phenomenon. He is currently the associate editor of UFO Digest. For the next 2 hours, Robert will take us through some of what he has discovered involving the moon, offer his expert analysis of the JFK assassination, as he also comments on the reality of conspiracy, the importance of the U.S. Constitution, Big Brother surveillance, and his personal reflections on what took place on September 11th, 2001. So without further ado, here's Robert Morningstar.
So, good to meet you, fellas.
You too, Robert. I'm really glad that we connected. I love your backdrop.
Yeah. Well, this is my office.
It's your office? Okay.
It's my office. It's called the Moon Room for obvious reasons. And I just used it recently. Yesterday, we shot a film segment in here because this is Apollo 17 landing site in the Taurus Littrow Valley. And before this picture was taken, an incredible thing happened on the deployment of the LEM. I have discovered the most important piece of UFO film ever taken, because it was taken by NASA. It was taken by the astronauts. Unbeknownst to them, it was an automatic onboard camera.
Okay.
And what the camera captured was, during the deployment of the LEM, that's the separation of the lunar module, the landing module, from the command capsule, the camera was set low, shooting out the window. And, well, right here, here's the LEM. Let me see, where's this? Okay, here's the LEM, right? And so it's covering the whole window. But as the LEM receded like this, you see the sky appeared?
Yes.
Very slowly, it does this. And right about here at the 12 o'clock position, this UFO appears, a black triangular UFO does this. It tumbles like that. And this is one of the funniest. I mean, there are great discoveries, and there are funny discoveries that are great also. So I see this film, and I'm watching it, and I go, whoa, what was that? You know? I jump out of my skin, literally. And then the LEM separates, and then the astronaut's reflection in the glass goes, whoa! Because you see his spacesuit shake, and then his space helmet goes, bonk. Because you see, the camera being low, I picked up the UFO when it was up here at 12 o'clock, and I see the whole thing go down here, but he didn't see it till it was here and disappearing around the side. And his space helmet, I put in the special effects. I see him go like this, and I go bonk. It's really a wonderful piece of video. So we shot an introduction here in the Moon Room, and then I show the video, and it's going to be on the Secret Space Program DVD. So I set it up with my 42-inch monitor, and the small monitors, we have two screens, and when the UFO is passing up across the big screen, I'm pointing out on the bottom of the screen. And it really came out very well. It's very exciting piece of film. The other piece of film, and I sent you a still from it, which is the Moon Racer. You take a look at that, the blue.
Yep.
Look at that thing.
Yep.
Yeah. I didn't draw that. George Lucas didn't draw that, but I have a feeling they gave it to Lucas so he could do his X-Wing fighters and whatnot, because that is a little strip, that's one frame. I think I sent you two frames, one on the horizon and one above the horizon.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. That was two sequential frames of a strip of film that was doctored. And the reason I know it was doctored is that I could see the splice mark. And the wonderful story about this little piece of film is that it's a time capsule from some honest NASA technician way back 40 years ago, 42, 45 years ago. A NASA technician was told, doctor this film, cut that UFO out, don't let the people see it. And this man, I can feel it. I can feel it. He was a loyal, truth-telling American, a scientist, and to be told to doctor a piece of film is a criminal act. That's an official government document.
Right.
So being told to cut this film, it's a crime. And the guy, to preserve himself, to save his life, to keep his job, feed his family, whatever, he had to conform. But he conformed in his own way. And he said, yeah, I'll do it. But what he did is he left 3.25 frames of the film where the craft is plainly visible against the sky. Because this is a stealth craft. When I picked this thing up in the film, racing across the moon, it looked like an icicle moving over ice. That's the way I would describe it. Or the other thing that came to mind was Wonder Woman's airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, she flew a glass airplane, so that the background would come through it, and so it was semi-stealth. Well, that's what I thought. Wow, what is that? Wonder Woman's airplane on the moon. And then it broke through, and but what caught my eye was the jump in the film.
Yeah.
And so I stopped it, and it's really tedious work to go frame by frame to find the frame. But when I saw the splice frame, which is marked, okay, you have two frames of film, right? Frame one, frame two, they're joined here. There's a black border. If you razor blade across that black border and join it, the film just continues and jumps. Nothing's obvious. But what he did was he left this much of the top frame, and he gouged the cut. It's almost like a signature. I take that carve that he put. It's not a straight cut. It's like a jagged hand. So I took it to be his signature, and I looked at it and I said, man, this guy he did risk his life.
Yeah.
He risked his life to let this out. And so I captured the frame with half the wing below the horizon, the body of the craft above, the whole craft out of the horizon. I have the two more frames. The third frame is amazing because when the craft actually enters orbit and is in the blackness of space, these three lights come on, space stations waiting, like guide lights or beacons, lighthouses. And those are going to be contained in the Secret Space Program video that we're working on.
So these beacons, Robert, were on the moon?
They're space stations in space.
Okay.
I have found, I have one photograph taken by Apollo 17 that shows 6 space stations of different designs maneuvering over towers on the far side of the moon. And these towers are, honestly, my estimate is that the Big Ben on the moon, it's 100 miles high. That photograph that I sent you, it's a segment. It's a very small piece of a giant moon photo that's showing about 1/8 of the moon. And this thing stands out on top. So that object that you're looking at, Big Ben on the moon, is 365 miles away from the camera.
That's 365 miles away.
That's 365 miles away from the camera that took.
Holy smokes.
The camera was on the spacecraft shooting automatically. It's called the Apollo metric mapping camera. So it was.
Wow.
And the astronauts may not even have seen it, because these were automatic. I mean, they saw a lot, and they're forbidden to speak about them. But I found 2 pictures of towers, and only recently I thought that the second picture I found was this same tower, Big Ben on the moon. But I realized I've been doing a lot of plotting and charting and navigation, and I thought that these 2 were the same towers, but they're not. They're almost identical, but they are separated. Let me see. by about 5 degrees. 5 degrees of longitude separate the two towers. They're about the same height and they're about the same latitude. So this is where I feel that what I've discovered, and this is not the only two. There's a huge number of them. What I feel that I've discovered is a power matrix that is feeding these spacecraft energy using what we call Tesla technology. Remember, Tesla said he could beam energy to airplanes. He said airplanes will be more efficient because they won't have to carry fuel. They're going to receive their energy electromagnetically through the wings.
Right.
So the engines will be different. It won't have to carry fuel. All that fuel will become, for passengers or transporting products. So what I feel I have found is on the far side of the moon, somebody's mining the moon. There are at least 6 space stations. There were at least 6 space stations in 1968, 69 to 72 when these photos were taken. And that's the reason we didn't go back. I liken the astronauts in their lunar module. I use this analogy. The Apollo astronauts in the lunar module, 2 guys going down in the lander to land on the moon. It's like 2 guys in a 2-man kayak leaving Pearl Harbor and saying, let's go take a look at the other side. And they go around the other side of Oahu. And when they're coming around Oahu on the far side, the USS Ronald Reagan supercarrier comes by. Okay? That's how I feel the astronauts felt when they saw these things. And the film, or the still photographs, the way I found the towers was actually, I was looking for something else. If you go to my Facebook page, you'll see the avatar, my dolphin head.
Yes.
I want to have the mind of a dolphin. I think we all have to grow a little, in that capacity. I did a lot of work in artificial intelligence and the work of John Lilly. Because, basically what we're talking about in dealing with aliens is interspecies communication. We're going to have to find a common language. Well, John Lilly was doing that with dolphins. That's really the essence of John Lilly's work. He was working in part of the U.S. Navy extraterrestrial program, working on a protocol where how we're going to communicate with these guys. Well, let's try talking to a dolphin. And I actually heard the dolphin say to Dr. Lilly, Dr. Lilly. He did. He has the wonderful films. They're hard to find, but I saw them because they were all over. It was open science in those days. 59 to 1967, we had open science. 1967, the Brookings Institute said that the secrets should be hidden from the public. If we found anything on the moon, that the public should not be told because it would be too disruptive to the social fabric and the economic foundations of society. So the decision not to tell us what was discovered or to be discovered on the moon was made a year before they took off. And you owe it to the Brookings Institution. And, it irritates me to watch CNN and Fox News and they say, oh, well, we have the spokesman from the Brookings Institution to speak about Syria. We have a specialist from the Brookings Institution to talk about Iraq. And I go, well, look at the mess they made of the moon. Why are we listening to these guys,
Yeah. Now, Robert, do you buy into the whole concept or the thought process that says we can't divulge this because humanity won't be able to deal with it? I mean, it sounds ridiculous to me.
Well, that's the point. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's the Brookings Institute paper called On the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And what they say is that religion would be unsettled, disruptive. Economics and science would be shaken to its foundations. Now, I don't know why they picked on the Buddhists, because that's what they said. They said that the Buddhist religion would be unsettled because if they were to reveal the existence of extraterrestrials. I said, what malarkey? That's full of baloney. The Buddhists have so many levels of existence, so many gods, so many deities, so many wrathful and benevolent uh, deities and demons and spirits and dakinis and apsaras. I mean, those are names for extraterrestrials as far as I'm concerned already. They would be very well adapted. So that was bunk,
Yeah.
right? But the key is this, and this is a statement from the Brookings Institution. It said that it would be so disruptive to science that it would depress scientists so deeply, so badly, that they might not be able to get out of the bed the next day to go to work when facing the futility of having to catch up with a civilization that was 200 to 300 years ahead of us. Why they would, and they list scientists, engineers, doctors as the three people who would be the three types of people who would be most upset, whose worldview would be shaken to the core. And what is that worldview? Well, the instant that you admit the existence of extraterrestrials and their operations on this planet, interactions, there goes Darwin's theory of evolution. You see?
Yep.
That's the cornerstone. Secondly, if we have extraterrestrials that are capable of this technology of interdimensional travel faster than light speed, bye-bye Einstein. I'm not into the cult of Einstein. I call Albert Einstein the traffic cop of the 4D universe. The traffic cop of the 4D universe with his guns, like, you can't go faster than the speed of light. And this is the point. Einstein lied. Einstein hid the real secrets in his equation. And I have flabbergasted some of the top physicists in the country because I asked him this question. I said, Einstein said that we cannot travel faster than the speed of light. But professor, don't you consider it a non sequitur and a fallacy for him to say that when his equation says E equals mc squared? How can you have a value of c squared if you can't go faster than c?
What's their response?
It's a very
Time for a break?
They stiffen up. No, this is one of the top physicists. You see him on television all the time. He's one of the top physicists in the world, and he goes, "What? We have never found any exception to Einstein's theory of relativity." And I said, "That's not the question that I asked you. I asked you whether or not it is a fallacy and a non sequitur for him to say that we cannot travel faster than the speed of light and for him to have a value of c squared in his equation." And then he said, "We have not found any exceptions to Einstein's theory of relativity."
There you go.
End of story. I said, okay, that's fine. You see?
Well, the
So
real problem, right, is the real problem is that their entire control mechanism, the entire apparatus comes apart.
Exactly. Well, see, well, it's a whole there. See, you know, Buckminster Fuller invented a molecule or hypothesized a molecule called a carcerand. You know, and the word comes from the Spanish word carcel. Fue a la cárcel. He's in jail, right? So the carcerand is this molecule that Buckminster Fuller envisioned that would trap another molecule inside it. And then you could take that and use it as a delivery system to put that molecule in something else. Well, I believe that modern scientists have created a matrix around themselves in which they are in the carcerand themselves. And as a result, they have imprisoned themselves in a molecular matrix of reality and are not allowed to go outside the carcerand into that realm of hyperdimensional physics, as Richard Hoagland and a few more pioneering researchers have labeled it.
Are you familiar, Robert, with the Thunderbolt Project and the Electric Universe?
Oh yeah, the Electric Universe is something that I adhere to. And since you brought up electricity, there's a remarkable theory about the formation of the craters of the moon that has to do with electric arcing. Have you seen that?
I understand what you're saying because I watched the Thunderbolt Project's documentaries, and when they lay it out, it makes perfect sense. And mainstream science it doesn't make any sense after you watch one of their documentaries.
Right. It all boils down to the forbidden physics of There were four equations by James Clerk Maxwell that dealt with I guess, an electronical unified field theory. There were four equations, and it dealt with electricity, magnetism, and gravity. And the powers that be forbade the study of the realm of electromagnetogravitics. You can do electricity, you can do magnetism, you can do electromagnetism, but you can't mess with an EMG. And as a result, they doctored the formulas and they hide the equations and they blackball people who dare to go into that realm of forbidden physics. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of really brave physicists who are doing that work outside government, outside the establishment, and independently. And I met some of them at the Secret Space Conference in San Mateo. There are actually people who are working now to build UFOs according to the plans and technology that we do know exists. Tesla designed a flying saucer in 1892. I saw the patent, but I like to call it Captain Nemo nuts and bolts technology. Remember?
Yeah. Yes.
All heavy iron, like Captain Nemo's submarine in the Walt Disney movie. So I refer to that. So Tesla was working with Captain Nemo nuts and bolts technology, and what he did was he designed a flying saucer that was made out of triangular wedges, right? Triangular wedges, pie plate, and the pie plates would meet and join on top and on the bottom. And he had capacitors and resistors that would create a positive on one and a negative on the other, and then would undulate. So he had this wave circulating the top and the bottom of the hull alternately, because he was into AC, alternating current. We wouldn't be here, without Tesla. He is the man.
Yeah.
We want to give it to Edison. Anyway, he built this electromagnetogravitic flying craft in 1892, and he did the drawing, and the patent is there. There's a really wonderful book, if it can still be had. I bought it on Amazon, and it said The Patents of Nikola Tesla. Big coffee table type of book. Oh my Lord, man is one of the greatest geniuses of all time. And so that plan was taken over by several. The patent is there, right? So since 1892, Germany had access to it. It was open. Patents were open. And then the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Air Force. Tesla died in January 7th, 1943, and all of his papers disappeared. His body was gone. The papers were gone. And the country, Yugoslavia, took the United States to court for the next 40 years, longer, the next 50 years, to get back the patents, because Tesla was Yugoslavian, and so they claimed his patents and his paperwork belonged to them. And it went through the courts, and around 1995, the Supreme Court said, yeah, you have to give it to them. So they got it, and they started working. Yugoslavia was one of the most advanced scientific countries in the world. I mean, Yugoslavian scientists, hey, look, Tesla was Yugoslavian, smarter than the Russians, is what I say. So they got to work on it, and I believe, honestly, that the Yugoslav war had two aspects to it. One was that Muslim-Kosovo conflict, but the other one was we knew they were working on this stuff, and we said, we can't let the Yugoslavs get this. And we used that opportunity, right, the excuse of saving the Kosovans and the Muslims, right, to really blitz them. And on top of it, you remember we hit the Chinese embassy?
Yes.
You don't hit a Chinese embassy by accident,
Right.
I think that was an intentional punch in the nose to the Chinese and saying, look, we know what you're doing. We know you're collaborating with the Yugoslavians on Tesla technology. You're not going to get there first. Here, take it. Boom. Oh, the CIA map was wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oops.
Oops, right. So that's how ridiculous these people have become. I have no respect for liars. My mother said to me, never trust a liar. Even if somebody lies to you about a little thing, don't ever trust them again. Because if they lie to you about a little thing, they will lie to you about a big thing.
Exactly.
And that's my mother's advice. And by the same token, it's kind of a suicide to lie yourself. It changes your brain, you know. The lying brain has to put out different, um, it forms different nerves. They've studied the brains of habitual liars compared to normal people, and they found that habitual liars have certain more neurons from their cortex to their cerebrum. And they hypothesize that when a liar makes a lie, he has to rationalize a lot of excuses and start to concoct cover stories. And that the concoction of all those cover stories has to create this greater neuronal matrix where they can access all the supporting evidence to uphold their lies. But I use this analogy to just in the brain to show how a government of lies has to collapse in a given amount of time, because the cost of propping up lies, let's just take the Kennedy assassination, for example. One instance, let's say they had a witness they didn't want talking because the witness was telling the truth. So we got to get rid of him. Okay, send somebody over to talk to them. Tell them not to talk. They send somebody over, comes back, he says, it doesn't work. Okay, we got to send somebody else over. Send somebody else, beat them up. They're still talking. Okay, now we're going to have to kill them, right? That's a cost. It's a cost in time, in resources, in money. And then there's the cover story, the Arlen Specter and the magic bullet theory.
Yeah.
Right. Every aspect of that has to be held up by another lie, another lie. Eventually it becomes like a house of cards that's only teetering, balanced on its own edge, and then the weight of it grows so great, it just has to collapse. And that's my hope. And that's why I work in the field of the John F. Kennedy assassination, and why I work in exposing what we really found on the moon. Because if we only have half facts, we cannot make a rational decision about anything. If we are, see, it's like mines. When you're seeking truth, you're like going through a minefield, and the minefield is pits of dislogic, mines of disinformation, and you have to extract, and by comparing, contrasting, collating, overlaying, you get to the truth. You know, if you take 3 circles or 2 circles and you overlay them, you get this thing called the vesica, that shape where they, all right. If you have all this information, I like to overlay it. And then where that crosses over, that's what I consider truth, you see? Where they're correlated.
Yes.
A witness testimony goes with a certain picture, goes with a certain timeline. Then I believe that is true, no matter what the government says. For example, Tippit was shot. Officer Tippit, the Kennedy assassination,
Yep.
he was shot like 1:10. Oswald was already in the theater. So they had to change all the timelines to force true this story that Oswald shot Tippit. Did I mention that Tippit is the model in the JFK assassination photographs? That's another thing. I discovered 3 things.
I had heard that, and I'm trying to think now. Did I hear it from you?
Well, we've never
I think
spoken, but you probably read it from me.
I probably read it from you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I made, you know, when you're in the process of investigation research, there's a certain kind of inspiration, and things, nature, God starts to conspire with you and starts to drop things in your lap, you know. And this, what I'm going to tell you, is so amazing that it was hard for anybody to believe. And in the middle of this, proving that the photographs that had been presented as those of President Kennedy in the autopsy morgue are Officer J.D. Tippit. That's unbelievable. But when it hit me, it just was an incredible discovery. And How do you tell people? Well, in the process of writing that, my dissertations on the brain, the autopsy, how the brain of Tippett was used for the autopsy of President Kennedy because he was shot through the brain with one bullet, and that's what was taken out. So they take that brain, they give it to the autopsy. They said, oh, this victim was shot once through the brain. He died of a single gunshot wound to the head. Okay? That is true. It's true about Tippett, but they told the autopsist it was Kennedy. Kennedy's brain, there was not enough brain left to make the statements that are made about the brain in the autopsy. His whole right hemisphere was liquefied. It was maybe, at the most, there was 60% of the brain left. So it's not possible to make statements about the hippocampus or the cerebral peduncles, and describe these organs that are not there.
I always wondered that, Robert,
Right.
because even when you watch the Zapruder film, which was doctored,
Yes.
right?
That was my first claim to fame. I was the first one to stand up in front of 200 people and say, hey, fellas, sorry to tell you, you've been doing all this research for 30 years in vain. The document is doctored. You cannot arrive at true, accurate scientific conclusions when 10 feet of the film have been cut off.
Yeah. Yeah, and even in that film, his brain, where it was in the back trunk of the car,
Yeah.
I always wondered, even as a kid and growing up, I would say to myself, well, how were they able to do any analysis of the brain when I just watched a film and,
Exactly.
the whole right side was on
Yeah.
the trunk.
And it's worse than you saw.
Yeah.
It's worse
Um,
because I'll tell you, I found last year, I have a saying, God works through Google now. Because this algorithm where it studies all of your likes and preferences and it starts throwing stuff at you? Well, people don't like that. But personally, I do because I say God works through Google. I was on an interview, November 22nd of the 50th anniversary. I was interviewed at 7 o'clock on Far Out Radio, and then I got a call from Coast to Coast to be on Coast to Coast in the wee hours. Right? So it was a 24-hour day. So I'm getting ready for Coast to Coast with George Noory, and I got to brush up, keep doing things and going along. And all of a sudden, Google, Gmail drops something over here in the right corner, a little icon, and says, undoctored Zapruder film and undamaged. And I look at it. I go, well, that thumbnail looks pretty ragged. It looks wrinkled. How can they say it's undamaged? So I turn it on and I go, oh, this is a little different. And then it's going by there are many ways that the Zapruder film is doctored. They took out 10 feet of film. They had to take out 2 stops of the car. So how do you eliminate 2 complete stops of the car? You have to create a sense of continuity and false acceleration. And by cutting and joining and slipping, and it's very complex, but what they did is the key is this. The Stemmons Freeway sign was lined up in the background with the corner of a building in reality. And I found in the Zapruder film that in the first instance, the building was slid back, right? And in the next instance, the sign was back where it belonged. And those 3 frames created the illusion that the car just sped by past the sign. He actually pulled over to the curb and stopped. That's when President Kennedy got shot in the back and shot in the throat, almost simultaneously. But he was shot in the back first, and he said, oh my God, I've been shot. And the 2 Secret Servicemen testified to that to the Warren Commission. And our inspector tried to discredit them and said, no, that's impossible because President Kennedy was first shot in the throat and he couldn't have said a word. And they said, no, we heard him say it. He said, oh my God, I've been shot. And they said, oh, no, he was shot in the throat. And this is Kellerman and Greer, right, before the Warren Commission. And the obnoxious senator from Pennsylvania, our inspector, starts to harangue and harass them like he did. He browbeat a lot of people, And he says to them, no, he couldn't have said that. He was shot through the throat. How can you be so sure? And the Secret Serviceman says, because he said it with a Boston accent. And read it. Go to the Warren Commission report and read it. You'll be amazed. The other amazing thing is this. Abraham Zapruder testifies before the Warren Commission, and he says to them that he saw the head of the president pop up behind the sign. He said he was shooting the film, and he saw the president's head pop up and drop back down. And they said, no, that's not possible because he was blocked by the sign. And he said, no, I saw him I was taking the movie. I saw it. And then he goes on to say, they ask him, you shot the film, what film speed did you shoot it? And he said, I shot it at 24 frames per second. And he said, oh, no, the FBI says you shot that at 18 frames per second. And he said, no, I was shooting at 24. And then all of a sudden the test, like, oh, okay, we won't talk about that, They put that aside. Now, why is that significant? Zapruder was telling the Warren commissioners that he had shot the Zapruder film in slow motion.
Yeah.
I know because I had the same camera.
Okay.
I know. I can run into the other room and bring it over here and show it to you. You want to take a chance?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to do it.
Okay.
Be right back.
Hey, Robert, we have a question for you.
Sure.
When Zapruder took the film, the video...
Not video, film.
Film. Yeah, I'm sorry, film.
Yeah.
He wasn't supposed to be there, right? I mean, that was a route.
Oh, yeah, he was set up. Jack Ruby called Zapruder, told him, get down there with your camera.
Yeah.
The whole thing was a setup. It's a mafia CIA hit. And the mafia's profits was going to come from, hey, man, you're going to take a picture. Jack Ruby borrowed a Polaroid camera that morning. He was standing in front of the sign. He's been cut out from almost every picture.
Yeah.
That's why it's doctored. Jack Ruby was there with his dog, Sheba. Sheba was his wife.
Okay.
This man, Jack Ruby, is one of the most vile creatures that has ever walked the earth. When you read his life and read what he was like, what he did, how he was... brother. Read Seth Cantor's book on Jack Ruby, and you'll find out he was an extremely violent man.
Yeah.
He hated women. He lived with a homosexual named George Sinclair. He was part of this real underground group of New Orleans, Dallas, cross-dressers and whatnot, secret society stuff. And he was just really a pretty vile creature. And he was the mafia agent. I'll tell you one more thing I just discovered last year. In the Dallas Police Department archives, which are now on the internet, you can go to something called the Portal to Texas History, and all the documents the Dallas police had on Tippit, Ruby, Oswald, everything is there. I found a 1947 letter from J. Edgar Hoover saying, give elbow room basically to Jack Ruby. Don't arrest him, because Jack Ruby is acting as an informant for Congressman Richard M. Nixon. So from 1947 through 1964, Jack Ruby was a person known personally to Richard Nixon as an informant. During the 1950s, Jack Ruby and Thomas Eli Davis were running guns to Castro. That was the gun running thing is a very big operation. The Iran-Contra, that's the grandchild of all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So he runs guns to Castro for the revolution. Castro wins the revolution, turns against the United States, goes communist, and now Ruby starts dealing guns to the anti-Castro Cubans in league with General Walker, who had been ousted from the army. General Walker's men were stealing the arms from Fort Hood, transferring them over to Jack Ruby. Ruby was selling them, splitting the money with General Walker, and that was the funding for the Minutemen. General Walker and the Minutemen. Mm-hmm. And all of it was Ku Klux Klan related. Tippit was in it. The arresting officers, if you look at the tramp photos, famous tramp photos, Dealey Plaza, one of those men is Tippit. And the other one's walking, he's getting his picture taken, and he's really nervous, and he puts his fingers like this, like he's smoking a cigarette, like, oh, trying to be cool. But on the sleeve, if you see on the inner sleeve, you'll see a circle with a cross, like a sight, a target. That was the symbol of the Minutemen, of General Walker's Minutemen. Also, you look at their hats, and they had weird secret codes. In a regular cop, policeman's hat or officer's hat, the silver band is in front, right? You have, let's say, an officer's cap. The shield on top, the logo of the eagle.
Right.
Then you have a black, and then you have a silver if you're an officer, or a gold if you're a higher rank. These cops would tip each other off. They would take the silver band and put it across the back of the head. And that was a signal to each other, along with the patch, that they were good old boys and members of the Minutemen and the Ku Klux Klan.
Okay.
So that's a big part of it. So here's the camera that I was referring to. This is what Zapruder had in his hand. You hear this? Can you hear that?
Yes.
That's 18 frames per second. Can you hear this?
Yes.
That's slow motion. There's another one. I love this camera. It's fate, you know. In 1963, my father at Christmas time said, "Hey, buddy, what do you want for Christmas?" I said, "Dad, I love movies. I would like this, and I'll even pay for it. If you'll take it out on a layaway plan, you know, I'll work, I'll do, you can have it." So he got this for me. So I was shooting in 1963. I was shooting from 63 to 70 when the camera was dropped and conked out. I was shooting movies with this. And this is what Zapruder had on the abutment at the Grassy Knoll. This is a single lens reflex. This was the most advanced movie camera at the time, Bell and Howell. Through the lens reflex, the light came here, hits a mirror, and you see in the mirror, in the lens, in the focal piece, exactly what you're going to see, because the others had parallax. It drove me crazy. My first camera was a Yashica, and I would be shooting movies, and I framed perfectly, and then I was coming up, and you know, sometimes the top of the head of my subjects was cut off.
Yes.
What's going on here? I'm perfect. And my friend said, "No, man, that's parallax. You're looking through here, and it's shooting through here." It was actually the other way. And so my friend John Parks, we were rowboating, and his head was cut off at the top. So I finally learned about that, and that's why I wanted this. I was sick of that adjustment. So look, it has an electric eye and automatic setting focus. It has 3 speeds. If you push up, you could do animation. If you push upward 1 frame a second, if you press this lightly, you get that, and if you squeeze it hard, you got the...
Okay.
Right.
But it was very expensive. Slow motion.
I was just going to ask, what
Oh,
did that camera cost back then?
Oh, I'm not talking about the camera. I'm talking about the film.
Yeah.
You squeeze this thing, 2 minutes of film was gone, you know, in 2/3 of the time. So this camera at the time, I think it was about $400. But $400 in 1963 was a lot of dough.
Was a lot of money. Yeah.
Now, I go by the price of pizza. Pizza was 5 cents a slice in 1963.
Wow.
And it's $3 or more a slice now.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was worth it, you know, because, well, it made history. Had I not known this camera, I would not be able to tell you all of these details about what Zapruder was telling the Warren Commission. So we were supposed to see that film in slow motion, and yet the car appears to be going 35 miles an hour through the whole film and never stop.
Yeah.
Now, Robert, as
Yes,
far as the players that were involved in the assassination, what's your take on their involvement in Operation 40? That they were trained by some of the CIA agents that were in Operation 40, or they're part of Operation 40?
Oh, yeah.
LBJ's involvement.
Absolutely.
And Oswald being a CIA spy.
Right. You know,
Really
the CIA...
just flying around from country to country beforehand and brought back
Right.
into the country on a military hop.
Absolutely. You're
Right.
absolutely right. You know, there's a CIA wall where they have all these stars, the stars of all the agents that died in the line of duty.
Yeah.
I believe that one of those stars is Lee Harvey Oswald. And maybe 100 years from now, they may tell us, Mrs. Oswald, his mother, said, Lee Harvey Oswald is one of the greatest heroes. My son was a hero, and someday the nation will learn of it. Yes, he was. He was a very intelligent man. extremely intelligent, so much so that he picked up Russian, in a very short amount of time. He went there on a mission to infiltrate Russia and send back information. He got a job in a Minsk radio factory. Then they arranged a marriage for him to Maria Prusakova, whose uncle, she was an orphan, her uncle raised her, and he was a colonel in the GRU. That was kind of like the equivalent to the military FBI.
Yeah.
And there's the KGB. KGB is like CIA, and the GRU was like the FBI. And a man who had defected, renounced his citizenship, tried to commit suicide in Russia, changes his mind, goes to the embassy, says, hey, I want to go back home. I want my passport back. I have a wife. And at a time where the United States was not allowing this kind of emigration.
Yeah, they just...
Boom, rubber stamp, instant wife, him. And so he's brought back. He lands in Atlanta, where he's met by a doctor named Dr. Andrew Davidson. He had a giant trunk with him. The trunk stayed in Atlanta. He shows up in Dallas. His brother, Robert, picks him up. And Robert's biography, he wrote a book about it. And at least 3 times in the book, he gives hint that he didn't think that this guy was his brother. Mm. He says that he went to the airport to pick up Lee. But when I saw him, I could hardly recognize him.
Yeah, I've heard that.
He was short. He was 3 inches too short, even though he was wearing 2-inch high cowboy boots. His hair was kinky, and he was scrawny. My brother was a bull-necked Marine. He had a lot of charisma. He had brown, wavy hair. Okay, that's the first thing he says. Then he says that at the Thanksgiving dinner of 1962, he introduced Lee to his family. The mother was there, Robert was there, and the half-brother. A lot of people don't know this. There was an older brother named John Pick, who was the half-brother of Lee Harvey Oswald and Robert Lee Oswald, the younger brothers. It had never been told to anyone that the mother had been married before, and they were always the Oswalds. And so when Oswald introduces Marina to the family, he says, this is my mother, Marguerite, this is my brother, Robert, and this is my half-brother, John. And when he said those words, the family went into shock. And he said, this was something that we never told anyone. Everyone was really upset. Mm-hmm. And it was something that Lee would never have done. Because divorce, illegitimacy, 2 fathers, that was not, it was not as commonly accepted as it is today.
Yeah.
So it was a big, like you say, a skeleton in the closet, and he had let the skeleton out of the closet. And there are a lot of other instances where he gives hint that he was wondering about this guy. There's something wrong. 2 inches, 3 inches too short, kinky, balding hair. Brother had wavy, smooth hair. A lot of details. So either Oswald was killed, or they worked him over and really made him a mind-controlled idiot. He showed signs of an operation, mastoid operation back here, and the Russians were notorious for this kind of operation. They'd open up a person over here and put an implant and make them, as I say, mind-controlled idiots. Marina Prusakova, his wife, Marina Oswald, she was a member of Komsomol, which was like the communist Boy and Girl Scouts. She was also a pharmacologist. She was a graduate and a licensed pharmacologist. So I believe that she was the controller of the real Oswald or the fake Oswald, but she was a controller. She was also one of these sex spies that the Russians had, where they would enlist very beautiful women to become spies for Russia and, do it for Mother Russia.
Yeah.
Seduce these guys, get the information, have sex with them out of patriotism. She's that type, and she's very fishy. And she had sex with everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of those spies are under mind control also. They're sex
Yeah,
kings.
well, the sex is a big part of the catch, the hook.
Yep.
Well, if you read Ruth Paine's biography, Mrs. Paine's Garage, you'll find out that Marina had sex with Michael Paine. Marina had sex with Mrs. Paine. And I believe Marina had sex with the FBI agent who was coming to check in on Oswald.
Mm.
And I think that's the reason that Oswald went and threatened to blow up. Stay away from my wife.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? That's what it was.
She was very accommodating.
She was. Well, you see, we don't understand, but the Russians had been taken over by such an amoral philosophy that you don't know, Americans don't realize yet the degree to which sexual experimentation was such a big part of Russian indoctrination. And to you gentlemen, I would recommend a book that's called Red Shambhala. Write it down. Most important book I've read in the last 20 years to understand the mentality of subversion and seduction that the Soviets were engaged in. Literally hijacking people's mythologies to serve their ends of subversion. Shambhala was this mythical kingdom that the Central Asians had been wishing and praying for, like the coming of the Messiah. Shambhala was the New Jerusalem to them. And so they were waiting for this legend to come true, which said that Shambhala, this kingdom of heavenly peace, this kingdom of universal brotherhood would one day be established in the far north, and from the far north, Shambhala would spread and universal brotherhood would come of it. So Soviet psychologists said, man, we're having a tough time with Europe. We're not going to get anywhere. They don't want communism. The bourgeoisie has become too decadent. They're too comfortable. They're happy. They don't want communism. So let's turn our eyes to the east. And so they did. So what they did is they found out about this legend of Shambhala, a city in the north that would grow and bring universe. And they said, well, let's tell those dumb Central Asians, the superstition, that we are Shambhala. Actually, we're in the far north. We're Russia. We had a revolution. We espouse universal brotherhood and heavenly peace, blah, blah, blah. Let's tell them we're them. And we'll convince them that we are the fulfillment of Shambhala. Well, it worked. And they went, they got Tibetan communists, they got Mongolian communists, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, all of those Central Asian republics became Soviet republics as a result of the hijacking of the myth. And I feel that the same is being done to us. Our myths are being hijacked. And Obama did it. Obama did it in the 2008 election. Symbols, remember?
Or the Messiah symbolism.
Yes, Obama the Messiah, Obama posing with the donkey at Easter time.
Right.
Rising sun.
It was flagrant. And to people like yourselves and me, it's obvious manipulation and mind control. But those people who really believe what they see on CNN believe it. You know, I went to school at a wonderful time at Fordham University. I was pre-med, then I switched to psychology because I think psychology is the real healers, these days. So at that time, Marshall McLuhan was the first chair. The first communication department in the United States was at Fordham University. Marshall McLuhan, who wrote the book, The Medium is the Massage. Now, they tell you now that Marshall McLuhan said the medium is the message. That's not true. They're changing it. What he really said is the medium is the massage. And what he meant was that the medium is manipulating your subconscious to make you accept what the content that's coming over. That the real message is the massage that it's giving your brain, planting subliminally ideas that they want you to be receptive to. Yeah. So that's what. So his influence was pervasive, and I was fortunate enough to go to the university there, and the psychology department was really tight with communication. So his ideas permeated the atmosphere, and I became, in the course of time, an expert in mass media communications. It appealed to me very, very greatly.
Now, Robert, do you see an actual shift or change taking place? Because it just seems that the masses are still extremely gullible and extremely apathetic. you talk to some people and they say, yes, a shift is taking place, people are waking up, and and then sometimes you take a step back and you look around. It just seems like, well, there's a minority of people who really understand what's going on, but the vast majority of the people are just, they're in line. They fell in line.
Yeah. Well, it's my hope that the people who wake up other people, and it's a matter of time. But I do have a lot of hope. I see many more people. Conspiracy is becoming a respected word again.
Yes.
And I say to people, hey, I want you to remember something. The act of conspiracy existed before the word was coined to describe it. Go to Webster's dictionary and see what's there. It's not there because it doesn't exist.
Exactly.
It's there because it exists all too clearly. I wrote in 2005. I got this inspiration because of this conspiracy theory thing, the tag that they try to label you with. So I sat down and I said, you know what? History began with a conspiracy. History began with an assassination. The first recorded deed in history is the assassination of Osiris. And what did they do? They got him to sit in a coffin. They isolated him. They hacked him to pieces. They got rid of his body. And that's how history began. That's the first, the beginning of official history. Well, I am an expert in assassinations, and I sat down that night and said, people really need to be convinced about something. Conspiracy is a real word for a real thing. So let me go. Osiris, King Tut was assassinated. Jesus was assassinated. You can't call Jesus' death anything else but.
No, you're right.
He was assassinated.
Right.
Okay? Joan of Arc was assassinated. Siegfried, the German hero, was assassinated. Francis Ferdinand started World War I. He and his wife were assassinated. The King of Yugoslavia and the President of France were assassinated in 1938. The mayor of Chicago was killed instead of the President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1934. Blair House and Truman were assaulted, and 2 Secret Service men died in the Blair House attack. So, folks, this really does exist. And you better wake up to the fact that conspiracy is a reality. So now it's becoming less and less effective when they say, oh, conspiracy theory. Do you remember Posner?
Yes.
Darrell Posner wrote the worst book in the history of the JFK assassination called Case Closed. And he coined this term, JFK buffs, to ridicule us. And he kept using it, JFK buffs. Oh, you JFK buffs. You know what happened when the people call me JFK buffs? I say, yes, I'd rather be a JFK buff than a Warren Commission buffoon. That ends it. You see? That ends it right there. And so you asked me about Oswald. I'd like to recommend a book to you called A Certain Arrogance. And this was written by my friend, my late colleague, Professor George Michael Evica, E-V-I-C-A. Okay? I owe him a great debt. I told you I went to Chicago in 1992 to expose the doctoring of the Zapruder film, and then I mentioned Tippit and the brain and why we hadn't seen any pictures of him, and maybe it was Tippit's brain that had been used. I said that publicly to 200 of the top in the world. There's a lot of laughter and ridicule at that moment when I said that. Ha ha! But as I said, God's on my side. The man who was the master of ceremonies at the microphone was Professor George Michael Evica, University of Hartford. And he said to them, wait a second, don't laugh. Not so fast. I've gone down to Dallas and I've investigated Tippit. And I have found out that Tippit bore such a close resemblance to President Kennedy that his friends on the police department used to call him Jack and JFK. And then there was utter silence in the place. And I was uplifted. I said, I am on the right track. I left that conference, and a man came up to me and he said, Mr. Morningstar, my name's Dan DuPont. I live in North Hollywood, and I have Tippit's autopsy report. I heard what you said, and I think you're onto something. I'm gonna give it to you. I said, you have Tippit's autopsy report? He said, yes. I said, how did you do that? He said, a Canadian reporter named Gary Muir went to Dallas in 1964 to investigate the assassination, and he investigated Tippit, and he got Tippit's autopsy report from the medical examiner. I have it. So I'm going to send it to you. He sends it to me. I start reading it, and my jaw dropped because I was reading the Warren Commission report on the brain, and I was reading the Tippit report, and they were talking about the same brain, the same conclusions in slightly different jargon. Then I go through the rest of the autopsy, and I start seeing, oh my God, they're talking about the Tippit body. They're just paraphrasing the autopsy that was done in Dallas by Dr. Earl Rose. Here's another significant thing. We all know that about the fight over the body. The Secret Service stole the body.
Yes.
It should never have left Texas, according to Texas law. But they fought, and Earl Rose, the coroner, was one of the people fighting till 2 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock, 2:15. That's when they took off. Tippit picked up on the street around 1:30 in the afternoon. An ambulance shows up out of nowhere. 5 minutes after Tippit's shot, an ambulance shows up out of nowhere, a time when there's no cell phones and no 911 or anything like that. They take him. He disappears for an hour. They don't know where the body is. At 2:30, he was pronounced DOA, dead on arrival, at Methodist Hospital. And Judge Joe Brown ordered an immediate autopsy. But that had to be done at Parkland, 14 miles away. 2:30 he's DOA. The judge says autopsy. Get him to Parkland to have the autopsy. So they raced the body to Earl Rose, the coroner. Would you believe it? He did the autopsy, signed, sealed, and delivered 3:15 in the afternoon. Imagine, 2:30 he's in Methodist. Even at 60 miles an hour,
Yeah.
and probably 90, let's say 60 miles an hour, 14 minutes, to get to Parkland, get the body out, race it into the morgue, do the autopsy. My estimate of the time they got the body into the morgue for the autopsy would be 2:55, and in 20 minutes he's finished the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because he had to pack them in ice and send them off to Walter Reed.
Right.
That's what's happened, Vince.
Right.
That's what's happened. And this story, it's nothing new. You read it in Shakespeare. Measure for measure.
What's really troubling, though, Robert, is the depth of the coup is staggering.
It is.
It's staggering. It's
That was my next question. I mean, the real players behind it, Robert. What's your take on
Well, you said it before.
That was dark occultist families who
Yeah.
basically usurped the government at that point. It was a public coup. And it was also a public ritual. And do you personally believe those same families are behind, they hijacked the space program, the military, and they're the real ones who are hiding the technology and keeping it from the masses?
You're right on everything. Yeah. Let me start at the top. Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson was on his way to jail. And the vote on his impeachment was coming down November 22nd, 1963. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the Senate committee that had been investigating Johnson was going to recommend his impeachment, and he knew it. And if he didn't become president by 1 o'clock in the afternoon that day, he was on his way to a long term in Leavenworth for this scandalous bribery and his land scam with Billy Solestes. That was a big land deal. He knew this land was going to be valuable for a highway and malls and things that were going to come down the pike. So Johnson arranged for Billy Solestes to buy vast tracts of Texas land on which these highways and malls and new cities were being planned for a quarter, 25 cents an acre. And then when the news was announced that they would be needed for these highways, malls, and cities that were being developed, he was able to turn them over for, scores of dollars, if not $100 an acre. And so they pocketed the money. He was found out. Bobby Baker was his executive secretary, and he was collecting shopping bags full of cash from the mafia, from all the briberies, and he was caught. So Johnson had become such a political embarrassment to President Kennedy that President Kennedy told him, get out of town, go to Dallas. You know, you're an embarrassment to the administration. Do something good down there. Get out of the limelight. And so Johnson knew that he was going to be bumped from the ticket. And Kennedy was lured down there on the premise of reconciling factionalism in the Texas Democratic Party. And he actually went down there to choose a running mate. And the two, because he couldn't win without Texas, you know?
Yeah.
So his plan was either to have Senator Ralph Yarborough as his running mate or possibly Governor Connolly. But Yarborough was Lyndon Johnson's greatest enemy in Texas. And listen to this. At 7 o'clock on the morning in Fort Worth, on the morning of the assassination, Johnson went into Kennedy's room and wanted John Kennedy to change the seating plan so that Ralph Yarborough would ride with him and Governor Connolly would ride with Johnson. Because Governor Connolly was Lyndon Johnson's protege. He was groomed as his adopted political son. And they had a vociferous argument. And really, it went on, and the voices were yelling and screaming, and Johnson trying to get him to change the seats until JFK just told him to get the you-know-what out of here,
right.
Take a hike. And at that moment, Johnson, in a rage, said on the phone to Madeline Brown, after today, these bastard Kennedys will never embarrass me in public again. So Johnson was number one. Secondly, he assigned Cord Meyer, who was John F. Kennedy's, rival since World War II, for his wife as well. John Kennedy was having affairs with Cord Meyer's wife. Cord Meyer was the head of the MKUltra mind control program. They had already had their deal with the mafia established. In September 25th, 1959, they gave the mafia $10,000 to kill Castro. Now, here's how this thing really, the irony is incredible. This was all the work of something called the 5412 Committee. This was the official assassination apparatus of the National Security Agency. And the 5412 Committee made a deal with the mafia to shoot Castro. The 5412 Committee was established in the Eisenhower administration with the vice president as chairman, so that the president would have plausible deniability. He wasn't told everything. He was told something was up, but not right. So he could say, I don't know anything about it. But the vice president knew everything because he was the chairman. So Johnson, ironically, when Kennedy wins the 1960 election, which he stole in Chicago with the help of the mafia, Lyndon Johnson became chairman of the 5412 Committee. So he inherited the assassination apparatus of the United States government. And when his head was in the noose, he turned that assassination apparatus against the president.
Okay.
So there you have it.
Yeah.
And you're right. So these books, I've said to you, you have all the background information. You know it. Now you need the details. So you read A Certain Arrogance by George Michael Ivica. You read Red Shambhala by Professor Andrei Zineev. And Mrs. Payne's Garage.
Okay.
The Paynes got him the job. The Paynes were big communists. The Paynes were related to Lyndon Payne, who was one of the arch communists of the 1930s and 40s. And communism subverted the Democratic Party through Henry Wallace and into the 50s. And they took over the civil rights movement. That's why the FBI was so wary then of Dr. Martin Luther King, because they knew that communist operatives had taken over the civil rights movement and were using it for subversive purposes.
Robert, when did John Kennedy, let me phrase it this way, what did John Kennedy do from the time that he was elected? Like you said, he had gotten elected with the help of the mafia, with the mob, and then that day in Dallas. What was he doing? Did he essentially leave the reservation? I mean, did he?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Several things happened. One of the things that happened to President Kennedy is that his consciousness was expanded. Mary Meyer, who you see the whole LSD psychedelic period, that was a product of the CIA.
Right.
The CIA wanted people to, for a period of time, several reasons. They wanted some aspect, some elements of our population to expand consciousness and become super brains. And then they also wanted to test LSD as a way of manipulating mind control in people. And so they had these programs, and Cord Meyer was in charge of them. Mary Meyer was his wife, and she approached Timothy Leary and told him that a very high-ranking Washington official was interested in knowing more about LSD. And she became the intermediary, and she got LSD from Timothy Leary to President Kennedy. And President Kennedy did 2 LSD trips while he was in the White House. And it's my belief that when he did these LSD trips, his consciousness expanded, and he saw the magnitude of the horror of a nuclear holocaust. And I believe that in reality, had his consciousness not been expanded, the Cuban Missile Crisis may have turned out a terribly different way.
Okay.
So what did he do? He was changing everything. That brush with nuclear annihilation radically altered his mind, his soul, and he took on a mission to see that this not occur by accident, because World War I actually occurred by accident, and John Kennedy knew this. The Guns of August, a book by Barbara Tuchman, shows how the miscalculations of all the world leaders led to the horror of World War I, and through the alliances. They didn't know that it was going to, domino theory, when you have alliances, one trips another, and that's how it happened. He didn't want that to happen. So he resolutely turned against the possibility of nuclear holocaust or even accidental nuclear war. So he started to take measures to bring about détente, to go to the moon with the Russians, to share scientific information and knowledge with them. He ordered that a recall device be placed in all B-52s and all ICBMs so that they could be destroyed right up to the last minute before a nuclear attack unfolded on Russia. He ordered General LeMay in the week, this is the week before he was assassinated, he ordered that 1,000 men be taken out of Vietnam by December, that in December we announce withdrawal, no Operation North Woods, you know about Operation
Yes.
Woods? Yep. No, we're not going to do that, and that was scheduled for December. He insisted that Israel had to open up the Dimona nuclear reactor for inspection, and that Israel desist from developing a nuclear bomb. And the civil rights movement, they blamed him.
Yeah.
They blamed him for the civil rights movement.
So
How about the? I'm sorry, Al. Go ahead.
So he was aware that there was a shadow government that was created by that point, and he basically didn't want to play ball. I mean, from the research I've done, I think that whole thing was solidified. That group of people solidified their holding of the government. I would say 1947, when the National Security Act was created.
Right.
I mean, they were involved in that before that with Russia and everything else, and World War II and funding of Hitler, and people know about that. But from the research I've done, and I'm not as research as you with Kennedy in particular, but I mean, it's obvious to me that he knew that there was a shadow government of foreign families that have come in who are trying to call the shots, and all the alphabet agencies at that point had a black side to them, a dark side that wasn't accountable, and he wasn't going to go for that. And I even think that faction of the government, the shadow government, were the ones that probably came up with Operation Northwoods for all the false flag events and everything else. And because even not the last speech, but the famous speech he gave where he basically called them out. I don't have the whole thing memorized, but it's a famous speech. I forgot where it was recorded, but I mean, do you agree with that? That he knew about that was
Yes, I
brewing,
do.
or they already had a little bit of a hold and they were trying to go for
The
broke?
Kennedys, not through the Kennedy clan, but through the Fitzgeralds.
Right.
The Fitzgeralds are the old High Kings of Ireland.
But he
Yeah.
was bucking the
And
system a little bit.
this
Yeah.
bloodline flowed in Kennedy and it flows in Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
So both of them were related to this whole occult family history. Yes, the Bushes were involved. George H. Bush was in Dealey Plaza. We now have several pictures of him there. George H. Bush also wrote a letter pointing the finger at somebody else, a Republican, Roger Parrott. You know, he wrote a letter to the FBI pointing to Roger Parrott as the guy who had been talking about assassination. Interestingly, George Bush of the CIA and a man with an amazing name that I've never forgotten since the moment I've read it, Sheffield Edwards. Okay, there's an FBI memo that says that George Bush of the CIA and Sheffield Edwards of the NSA had debriefed the anti-Castro Cuban community about the assassination to see how they felt about it, and they said that they were very saddened. The anti-Castro Cubans were very saddened because they had signals and signs of hope for improvement of relations with Cuba. That's another thing that Kennedy was doing. He had gotten back. Everybody hears about the Bay of Pigs and the fiasco. Few people realize that Kennedy got back all those prisoners and that he addressed the Cuban community in the Orange Bowl on November 18th. And he reconciled himself with the Cuban community by getting them back all the prisoners, gave Castro food and medicine in return. It was an incredible victory. And so the anti-Castro community, which some people want to blame for his assassination, was saddened by it. So that part is something that's not very well known. And as a matter of fact, here's another important fact. Another part that led me to the discovery of the Tippit angle. President Kennedy was supposed to have a motorcade in Miami, but they knew about the assassination attempt that was intended to be in Miami. Remember, North Woods is in Florida, and
Yes.
So he figured out that if they wanted Operation Northwoods to blow a bomb and blame it on Castro in December, they knew that something was up against him. So if he had been assassinated in Miami on November 18th instead of Dallas on November 22nd, the likelihood that they could pin the tail on the donkey on Castro would have been greater. So what they did is Secret Service said, no, we can't take a motorcade. We're going to take a helicopter. And that was a big change in plans. So President Kennedy came into the Rose Bowl riding on a helicopter, and he took off in a helicopter. He knew the plots were on. Everyone says, oh, he was prescient. He had a premonition 2 weeks before his assassination. He said, if they really wanted to get rid of me, they'd just get somebody on a high office building with a rifle, telescopic rifle. He didn't say that 2 weeks before. He said that the morning he was landing in Dallas to his chief of staff, Dave Powers. If you read the books on Kennedy, like Richard Reeves and William Manchester is really an interesting book. But he says to him, that morning, he said, if anybody wanted to get rid of me, they'd just get somebody with a telescopic rifle in a high office building. And then he turned to Jackie and he said, okay, be careful now. We're really in nut country now.
Wow.
He knew. He was Daniel going into the lion's den. And that thing about the Secret Service guys being pulled off the tail, it was he who ordered it. He ordered it because he didn't want a Secret Service guy to take a bullet for him. He's a great man.
You know what always troubled me, Robert, was Jack Kennedy aware of the rerouting of the motorcade? I mean, was he aware of?
No, I doubt he. You know what? They make a lot of stories about the motorcade and the access to the highway and that the entrance to the Stemmons freeways was locked. But there's a film taken there where it shows the guy panned right down and you see where they raced off. it was easier access. It was just as easy to
Yeah.
get onto the Stemmons from the main road than from Elm Street. But there was another important reason for choosing that site. It had to be done in Dealey Plaza because this was a Freemason ritual sacrifice, and President Kennedy represented Hiram Abiff and his assassination by the three craftsmen. And it happened. This is the other part. We're talking about these dynasties.
Right.
Well, there's the Protestant dynastic families, and the Kennedy were the Catholics, right? So what's significant about November 22nd? November 22nd, 1963 was the 50th anniversary of the Federal Reserve, the Jekyll Island thing and the passing of that. November 22nd, 1963 was also the 100th anniversary of the Battle of Chattanooga in the Civil War, which occurred a couple of months after Gettysburg. That is really, it was one of the, after Gettysburg, the Battle of Chattanooga lasted 3 days, and it was a slaughter.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when the Confederacy really went down the pike then. Okay. The South will rise again. I was a child in New Orleans and in Florida, and I'd see the billboards and the Ku Klux Klan guys, and I had a run-in with a Ku Klux Klanman at the age of 5 years old. That I'll come back one day and I'll tell you about my encounter with the Ku Klux Klan. At the age of 5, he caught me playing with my little black friend. You know, I had a little friend. We're both 5 kids, toddlers, living in a farm in New Orleans. And we're playing with little rocks, dropping them on crayfish in a pool. And a dark shadow came over me. And I saw utter fear go over my little friend's face.
Oh, man.
And I wasn't scared because I thought it was a priest. But I'll tell you that story. I want to stay the dynastic families. So November 22nd, 1963 was the 656th anniversary of the burning of Jacques de Molay and the killing of the Templars by the Catholic Church. You into numerology?
Yes.
656. Oh my God, it could have. Well, look, you got 656 years, and you take the last year, 1963, 1 + 9 + 6 + 3.
Yeah.
And you have your 10. They had to hurry it up. Now, Robert Kennedy, what day was he killed? June 6th, 1968. That 666 number is all over the place. I talked about the assassination of Osiris, right? I came across a book called Echoes of the Ancient Sky, and it says Osiris was killed when Mars was in Scorpio. That's astronomically, a date. On the day and the night that President Kennedy was killed, there was a conjunction of Mars and Venus in the constellation Scorpio. So all of this arcana, all of these arcane things, the god of assassination, Scorpio, looming over Dealey Plaza, the god of war, Mars, in conjunction with Venus. Who could have known these things in 1963? Only somebody in NASA could have had the details about these astrological associations. So they killed President Kennedy on the exact astrological date on which Osiris was killed to begin the new era of human history. He was killed on the anniversary of the killing of the Templars. He was killed on the anniversary of the Battle of Chattanooga. He was killed on the anniversary of the formation of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, I was say because Jacques de Molay, he was the last Grand Master of the Templars.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
So you're absolutely right. So
he was a biggie.
Yep, and this is a revenge killing, revenge against the Catholic Church, and it goes on. We're still in it, and I'm really happy to know that you fellas are really up on it, and that we're all awake.
Yeah,
Our eyes have been open.
Well, we try.
We're not as sleepy, and let's not be fooled again.
It's a learning process.
It certainly is.
It keeps going, which is what's really
and being awake can be lonely sometimes.
You know what? You just said it. The only depression, the first time in my life that I ever fell into depression was when I discovered the doctoring of the Zapruder film.
Yeah.
And the weight of that knowledge, the solitude, oh my God, I can't tell you how I felt. And I said, how can I possibly bear this? It changed everything until I made up my mind hey man, this has been laid on my lap. I really have to do it no matter what it takes and no matter how dangerous. I can't live with this alone. And so that's why I started to speak publicly and started to say what I found. And I'd like to thank Gary Null, Dr. Gary Null. He's a
Yes.
very famous investigator, radio announcer, producer. He was one of the first people to be told. And he honored me by coming to my house and sitting there for 3 hours as I disassembled the Zapruder film on a 27-inch monitor with a frame-by-frame video recorder, the most advanced stuff at the time. I just lucked out that I had it. And he sat there for 3 hours, flabbergasted. And I thank Gary. He's always supported me. I was on his show last November 22nd with Jesse Ventura. And my God, what a difference. What a difference 22 years have made. That was 1992. And in 22 years, we have liberated you and I and every one of us who's a truth seeker has liberated our fellow man, and we must continue to do that, no matter the cost. Because we're fighting for the Constitution. Right now, those people in Ferguson, they are the Boston Massacre of our time, and the Afro-American people may be the ones that save us all from the total tyranny of a militarized police state.
I was telling somebody that exact same thing the other day, Robert, that the black community has been oppressed and knows oppression so well that they're going to fight. They're going to fight.
Right.
Other communities most likely would not. They would just lay down and roll over.
Yeah, complacency, apathy. Well, that's the situation, similar to the communists not being able to make headway in Europe because the people were too comfortable.
Yeah.
Don't disturb my comfort. I don't care. Oh, yeah, I'll give up a little more freedom if I can feel more secure. Remember, Jefferson said, anyone who would trade a little liberty for a little security is worthy of neither.
Yeah.
So,
well, and the thing is, the rabbit hole is so deep. It's so deep and it's so dark that I don't know about yourself, but Al and I have spoken about this. Every once in a while, I really have to take a breather, take a step back. Live life, enjoy life.
Yeah, it could be overwhelming.
'Cause if you spend too much time in this stuff,
And depressing.
it'll fry your head.
True.
Yeah.
True. Absolutely. You have to take time off. You have to reconstitute yourself, but you cannot let the goal out of your sight.
No, exactly.
And it's really great. I'm thrilled by the reactions, that I receive, and honestly, the kindness and the respect that you show my work. I have never been paid a cent for any of this. I've given it away. I have, imagine, 500 hours a year for 22 years.
Wow. Okay.
And it's a civic obligation as I see it. A lot of people are in the JFK scene for profit, for fame. All I want is the truth. I'll tell you why. I felt that John F. Kennedy was my older brother. It was an uncanny feeling that I used to get. I was like, why do I feel that guy is like my brother? Then I met Robert Kennedy. I was at Park Avenue, 96th Street, 1967, with some high school buddies, and right at the light, and this limousine pulls right up, and the door's right in front of me, intentionally, right in front of me. The door flips open, out steps Robert Kennedy, and we look at each other, and I go, "Oh, he has hazel eyes, just like me. He has a hook nose. He's got hawk eyes." And I recognized then, I said, you know something? There is something to this. Years and years later, I discovered that my Celtic bloodlines overlap with not the Kennedys, but the Butlers who married the Fitzgeralds.
Okay.
You see? So there was that thing. I was feeling it. And, I was raised by an adopted father, and I was raised Spanish, right? So I'm come here, I'm Spanish. How can he be? He's Irish. I'm Spanish. How can I feel he's? Well, get this. In 1962, the 400th anniversary or the 500th anniversary of the discovery of America, President Kennedy put out a press release from the White House, and he said, I am descendant of a Spanish bishop who sponsored Columbus in the court of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand and secured the financing of the voyage that discovered America.
Wow.
So Kennedy was saying, hey, folks, I'm a little Hispanic too, although that word didn't exist in those days.
Yeah.
We called ourselves Spanish.
Yes.
Well, anyway, I'm Spanish and Celtic, a mutt. I am an unhyphenated American. Okay? That's what I think we all need to become, and stop saying, I'm Italian-American, I'm Jewish-American, I'm
Exactly.
Spanish. No, I'm an American.
Right.
It. End of story. Stop, because that was intentional too.
Yeah.
That hyphen was
Yep.
put there by Lyndon Johnson and, the Great Society.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. I forgot to tell you this. You know, he named that, he coined his administration was bringing forth the Great Society. Lo and behold, I pick up this book, Born in Blood by John J. Robinson, The Secret Foundations of Freemasonry. And I start reading it. And it starts talking about Wat Tyler's revolt in England, Wat Tyler's revolt, an uprising that took place and had to be put down very, very violently. And Wat Tyler is a hero. And there's a name in Freemasonry. He's called the Tyler, right? So then I start reading about it. And he said Wat Tyler was out to establish a new order, which he called the Great Society.
There you go.
And this was the first time that they showed their livery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was a white cloak and a pointed white hood and a red cross.
Mm.
So
Wow.
that's the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
Was the foundation of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really deep.
Yeah.
Those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it.
Absolutely.
And that's what I say to people. So we recognize the pattern. And the pattern that I recognize right now is a communist subversion of the United States, the dissolution of the United States Constitution, and that's what I'm fighting for. Because in my life, I have taken the oath to honor, defend, and preserve the Constitution at least 10 times, starting with my Sea Cadet years from the age of 10 to 15. And those are the most important years. And I have much more to share with you, but it's really important that we get our heads together, take out that hyphen, think like Americans,
Right.
Support the Constitution, and fight for the Constitution. Because you know what? We are who we are because of the Constitution. Who would you be without the Bill of Rights? Think about that.
Right.
Who would be without the articles of the U.S. Constitution, the freedoms that we derive from our Creator?
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to change all of that. We'd be nothing more than any Aborigine in any third world country.
That's exactly
Our
right.
humanity.
Yeah.
Humanity is defined by the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And, I'm very controversial. Sometimes I get tired of hearing about anti-colonialism or the bad, all the evil things about colonialism. There were some good things about colonialism. First thing, they learned English. Second thing, they learned they had human rights and human dignity. Those are things that were given to these colonies as a result of exposure to colonialism. But it elevated their minds, their consciousness, their social status. So not everything about colonialism was evil. Okay? Everything has the light and the darkness about it. And this present time, I see more light coming. And I'm standing with the people of Ferguson. My expertise in forensics and ballistics came from the JFK assassination. And when I read that forensic report, I first heard that somebody said, he went and he put a bullet in his head. He shot him right in the street in his head. His hands up. And I said, wow, if this is true, this is terrible. I said, so I wrote, if you look at my Facebook page, I wrote a lot about it. But the bottom line is petty thievery is not a capital crime and not an excuse for a public execution where the police play judge, jury, and executioner on the streets of America. Yes, Michael Brown was a bully. Michael Brown was a thief. Michael Brown was a menacing personality. But none of those things is a capital crime, and nobody deserves to die like that. The man was already incapacitated, if you've heard what I've heard. He was shot through the window and hit in the shoulder. He ran away. He got shot through the arm. He stopped, turned around. The cop put more bullets in him. But the one that is the proof is that the bullet went in his head, out his eye, and into his body. That means he was here when
Right.
the death blow.
Right.
And Dr. Baden says that he might have survived all those other wounds. So this was, to me, I don't care. It is murder, plain and simple. And I coined a word for it because it's been happening across the nation and now for years. And I call it police overkill. Overkill.
Yep.
One bullet's enough to stop a person, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we put stories up on the blog all the time about it, and I was telling Mike, I try not to go overboard with it, but I think it's important for people to see that all the brutality that's going on and police overstepping their bounds and trampling on people's rights.
Shooting dogs.
Yeah, shooting dogs left and right,
Oh.
which seems like, listen, some people may not like animals and say big deal, it's a dog, but listen, a dog is like any other thing. It's a living being,
Creature.
it's a living creature, and and they just seem that seems to be the new fad now. Just shoot the dog. I mean, they're trying to bust people. They go into the wrong house.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to they go to apprehend suspect A, but they go into suspect B's house. Well, there's not even a suspect. Their neighbor's house by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
They go in there, shoot the place up, shoot the dog, and that's it. They just walk back out. Oops, sorry, it was the wrong
Well,
house.
they're practicing terrorism.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is terrorism. I mean, if somebody came in and killed my pet in front of me, I'd be terrorized. And the threat is, okay, we'll kill your dog, you're next. Get out of the way. Really, the mind control apparatus of the United States government has grown so sophisticated that they are taking human beings and turning them into robots.
Yeah.
Police,
Yeah.
and they're unbelievably stressed, and I believe that many of them are on medications,
Yep.
the same medications that drive people to homicide and suicide.
Mm-hmm.
This cop, listen, he says that
SSRIs.
Yeah, he says that he felt that Michael Brown was rushing him. But think about relativity, right? The guy was in a frenzy. I call him a berserk policeman. And he was the one who was running. So what does he see? He's running. He doesn't know he's running. He's shooting. He sees the guy getting closer. The guy was charging him? No, he was charging Michael Brown. And no matter what he did, stealing $49 worth of cigars.
Yeah, stop. Right.
No reason.
Right.
It can
Be
be
murdered on the street, and I call it murder, because after the 4 shots and the chest shot, the cop was in no danger, especially 20 feet away.
Well, obviously, with their training nowadays, that's part of the training, is even with the military, is to stick those officers into left brain modality, where the emotion's not there, the compassion is not there, the empathy is not there. It's just basically take an order and follow it, and not take any
Call it a day.
responsibility for it.
No, that's mind control.
Blame it on the guy who gave the order, but they don't
Mhm.
take responsibility for the action.
There were some studies done in the 1960s, and Stanley Milgram, a university, I think it was Yale in Connecticut, and they did an experiment on authoritarianism because they want to explain, like, how can we explain the bad Germans? How could the Germans do that? The Holocaust and all those terrible things. They said, there must be something different about the Germans, So they did the psychological study, and they got a group of men to play prisoners and a group of men to play guards. And they found that once they settled into their identities, the guards on the authority given to them became more and more overbearing. And then there was the experiment of delivering electroshocks to a subject, and told that the numbers went in intensity from 1 to 10, and 10 could kill them.
Yeah.
And people would just, you have the authority, okay, so if a person is able to put their conscience aside, they can say, I'm doing it because it's validated by the government or my badge or my department.
Right.
And that is the real danger. And the Nuremberg trials made it very clear. You do not surrender your conscience to authority.
Exactly.
You don't say, I was obeying orders. But unfortunately, too many people are very compliant in that regard. And the psychotropic medications are facilitating it. You want to talk a little more?
Absolutely, Robert. You go as long.
I got more for you.
Okay.
We have brilliant writers and investigators working in every field. And in UFO Digest, there's a gentleman named Doc Vega who has been studying Dulce. He wrote a 10 articles on Dulce. And in the process, he revealed something to me that I did not know, but makes perfect sense in the light of its history. He wrote that Bethesda Naval Hospital was established after World War II. I'm worried about something, I guess.
A little slip there.
World War II, for a specific reason.
Oops.
I'm glad I can smile about it. Anyway, it was built for a specific reason, and he said it is this. During World War II, hundreds of thousands of soldiers were involved in black operations and top secret things. And when the war was over and they were coming home, the government was worried that these people who were privy to black operations and top secret things like atomic secrets or whatever else would start blabbing. So they had to assure a way of shutting this down. And he says that Bethesda Naval Hospital was established to process our servicemen, and in the process of debriefing and hospitalization, inoculation, all that kind of thing, that their minds were being scrubbed, that they were using hypnosis, coercion, and psychotropic drugs to suppress the memories, to silence them so they would never speak about atomic energy secrets, assassinations, black operations in World War II. And this became the foundation of the VA system. That's what I feel is happening.
Yeah.
They are trying to get rid of our vets. Yeah. The cost of maintaining a vet from his prime years, getting out of the service, let's say even if you do minimal service, a few years, 2 years, 4 years, you come out at 24, 29, and then the prospect of living through 30, that's going to be an astronomical cost. So I honestly believe that there's this thing called population pruning.
Absolutely.
Population pruning is my term for a slow genocide.
Yeah, the slow kill.
That's the other thing I say. Look, during the war in Germany, and even before the war, because it started around 1939 or 40, the groundwork of the Holocaust was an industrial infrastructure. It was being built before their eyes. The Germans, the workmen, the masons, the carpenters, the bricklayers, the rail workers, the guys that were laying the railroads to Auschwitz and Dachau, the men who were building the ovens and 30 ovens in a row here. They had to have said, what is this all about? No, they just I don't see. I collect my check. Right. Well, let me tell you something. In reading the Obamacare bill, I have come to the conclusion that that is the infrastructure for an electronic tyranny from which we may not be able to escape. The National Medical Registry database is the key to this plan, whereby they're going to habituate us. They're going to get us accustomed to this idea that all of our information has to be in one place and we have to surrender it and have it all the time. And the way habituation is when you get used to something as a course of habit, so it doesn't bother you anymore. So the plan for the implant is already well underway. The research has been going on since the early 1990s, since the time that Hillary Clinton was talking about, you know, well, medical tracking devices.
Right.
You know, it started out with, oh, wouldn't it be terrible to lose your pet? Put this GPS in his back. You'll never lose it. And then the tumors are growing in all these dogs and pets. Right? Well, we wouldn't want that. They're working on the technology. But here's how the habituation is going to work. First, they want you to have a credit card type of RFD chip on a credit card with all of your information on it. So you carry the card and the readers will scan it. Secondly, the next stage is going to be the wristband, because you're already used to it. You go to a concert or an all-day affair, they give you a wristband. You go to the hospital, they give you a wristband with your name on it and your condition. Oh, it makes sense. Okay, if I pass out, so you're getting used to this idea of wearing a wristband. Then they give you the wristband with the RFID chip, and then they perfect the subcutaneous injectable RFID chip, which is like a grain of rice, or the one you swallow. That's what we're up against. Secondly, what does your dentist have to do with spying? If you go into the Obamacare bill and type in dental surveillance, you will see that they require dentists to report on you on any kind of unusual stuff, you know. I worry about my dentist. He's a really nice guy, but he asked me about UFOs and extraterrestrials. And I told him, yeah, I've seen a few. I've had my own encounters. And then I went home and I said, gee, you know, he's a really nice guy, but he is bound to have a law. I wonder if his dental surveillance is going to report.
He wrote that into your chart.
No, he's very sweet. He's a very great.
No, I'm teasing. Yeah.
Yeah. Great to have it's great to have a doctor whose company is called Gentle Dental.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't mind giving a plug, folks. Gentle Dental. That's the way.
It's very clever.
Yeah, it is very beautiful. It's a network. So anyway, that's my thing. I have fought tooth, claw, nail, everything against the Obamacare bill, and I will not comply. I will not comply with an unconstitutional law. That's it.
So what do you do, Robert? This is the argument that gets thrown out. What if you have a catastrophic event? What happens?
I'll die.
There you go. Problem solved.
I'll die. It will be my time. No, I have had catastrophic events. I have pulled myself through without drugs. I take my pain. My insurance policy is Tai Chi Chuan. It has saved my life countless times. It has restored me to health even more countless times, because I live a very active, dynamic, and physical life. I mean, really a lot of exertion and sports. And I've invented a few sports myself, like double and triple disc frisbee, all outgrowths of Tai Chi. So instead of sparring, I have my students throw two frisbees at once at each other, to each other. The only rule, don't get hit.
Yeah.
Right? That way, in a kun, you know, a kun is a temple, the Chinese, the dojo is Japanese, but kun is A-W-O-O-N is the Cantonese word for a kung fu temple. In the kun, you spar and you get with your classmate, and your classmate will give you a kick in the head and wow, or a punch in the eye, and you know, I don't like that guy. Well, when you do this in the context of the sports that I've developed, we're playing with, I call it war soccer. We kick the soccer balls and we have to block and return them. Or double and triple disc frisbees. You put them together and you throw them as one. They fly off and split into two or three. You have to catch the two or catch the three, but the only rule is don't get hit. Okay. So if the frisbee clocks you at 60 miles an hour, it's a wallop.
Yeah.
I can't blame the guy who threw it, you see?
Yeah.
So it takes away that personal animosity, and it teaches you. I have a couple of little clips on YouTube, not YouTube, but on Facebook, where I play. I've developed something that I call hyperdimensional sports. By playing these sports, your consciousness expands, your peripheral vision improves, and you will react to danger before danger arrives. It has to do with reaction time, and you know.
Okay, I'm going to check it out.
9/11 changed us all.
Yeah.
It made me have a greater appreciation of every single life of every single person. And I told this story earlier that after 9/11 happened for about 2 months, I noticed a very interesting thing. Encountering strangers on the street, when you look at each other and make eye contact, it was almost like a, whoop, whoop. When you do the autofocus or the zoom, the camera goes, whoop, whoop, double take and perfect focus. Well, I started to see that look in everybody's eyes, and the look said to us, I don't know who you are, but I'm so happy you're alive.
Yeah.
It was that, you're a total stranger. I don't know who you are, but I'm so happy that you're alive and you're not dead in the World Trade Center. And I still feel that way.
Yeah.
So it was a very important lesson for all of us, and it's still not, the true story still has not been told.
It has not.
And there's no reason why all those things cannot be true. You see?
Yeah.
It is true, and I know this. Muhammad Atta, Hani Hanjour, and not Ramzi Ben Al-Shib, but Al-Shehi, they did hit the Pentagon. They did hit the two towers. But as the towers were burning, they did blow them up. And I have not said that since the day it happened, because I had not seen the film that convinced me until about 3 weeks ago, where they released these films, and you can see the whole section of the World Trade Center Tower 2 coming down intact, and then the pieces detonating.
Yeah.
That's the day I changed my mind. I'm a scientist. I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I'm a conspiracy scientist. When I see the information, my eyes analyze it, and now I do believe thermite was used to blow up the building while it was falling. Part of it was falling, and then the rest of it had to be pulverized. And now I am convinced it was both. People get into this problem of ascribing to one particular pet theory when there were 5 pets in Dealey Plaza. You see?
Yeah.
So truth is not always exclusive. Truth is seamless.
Yeah.
And two things can be true without being contradictory to each other.
Yeah, people like to ascribe this or that, but it can't be
Or
both.
only this or only that.
Yes, exactly.
That's the
exactly. Do you subscribe? I know, Rob, I want to be very conscious of your time. You've been great. The question I have was, do you subscribe to, like Judy Wood has brought forth a theory that an energy weapon may have been used also. I mean, you find that to be...
that to me is a little much.
Okay.
Because an energy weapon to have in such magnitude to hit the towers would have had to have spillover and have hit other things, buildings and things like that. I do believe that Building 7, I heard them say we're going to pull the building.
Oh, yeah.
But then my rationale was, it was unstable, the towers were down, there were people trapped in there, they couldn't go in to do the rescue for fear that Building 7 would come down, so before the rescue could be executed, they had to, pull Building 7. But that was just a rationale, and I don't believe it really had to be pulled. They had to pull it down to steal the gold. That's what I understand.
Right.
All the gold was
well, and and the thing is, to pull a building, I mean, you're not going to just get it set up in the first 5 hours of the day.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, this is something that has to be planned, a controlled demolition. So it came down. It was all pre-planned. And It was pulled. And if you take a look at some of the inhabitants of Building 7, World Trade Center 7, well, you can start to formulate an idea as to why they may have pulled that building.
Yeah. The other part is the insurance that Silverman took out. Big time insurance just a month or so before, a couple of weeks before. And a lot of people made a lot of profit.
For both buildings.
For both buildings, yes. And we have to look at all of it. And the banking cabal really is at the core of it all. Because those are the guys that pulled
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
Pay the hitmen, And the hitmen are, people who really hit people, and then the hitmen in the news who go out of their way to discredit and slander people.
Yeah, well, I want to, Robert, I don't want to take up more of your time. You've been just so generous with your time. I can't tell you how great this has been. It's been an honor to speak to you.
I feel the same way, fellas.
Yeah,
and
great time.
really happy to know you guys. And let's do it again.
Okay.
And
Absolutely.
November is coming, faster than we think. And that's a time when I really do like to speak out on the President Kennedy. And having found the missing frames of the Zapruder film, I want to tell you about the only hero in Dealey Plaza was Jacqueline Kennedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got the big picture, and I'm happy to share it with you.
So you want to connect again sometime in November?
Oh, sooner than that.
Sooner than that? Okay, yeah.
That sounds good.
Once a month.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
All right, Robert.
All right,
Thank
Robert.
you.
Bye-bye now.
Pleasure. Good to know you.
You
You
too.
too.
Have a good one.
And that concludes our interview with Robert Morningstar, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as we did. And we are looking forward to having Robert back on the show in the very near future. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog, The Sage of Quay. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.